what is IB actually. Oman had about 3 schools in 1970s.
We choose the best teachers.
And as an international school, we still need to be mindful.
Cross-cultural educational dialogue.
Soft skills that you need when you go out into the workplace.
The education system needs to change and change rapidly. The idea of the IB is that
But how are you ensuring that you maintain the image of your culture?
more skill-based curriculum.
It's a board which governs about 30,000 schools.
To those soft skills we're talking about: communication, researching, collaboration, risk-taking.
To ensure that your children are happy.
What can I do, not what can I not do?
Now let's talk about mental health.
Does my child feel safe?
Because AI is developing along with us.
Children below 16 are not allowed to use social media at all.
Relationships.
Children don't grow overnight.
Online learning is not a substitute for human interaction.
The
Really.
parents, they are after the school if the child gets less marks.
Teachers teach the way they were taught.
Standardized testing impacts creativity.
India is a really good example.
It's not math being taught or science being taught.
Yeah.
A unit is being taught.
Proud of your country.
The parent's obsession is kind of hurting the child.
And a child is never too young.
I promise you, every minute you spend on today's episode is going to reshape how you think about education, not only in India, but global education. If you have ever wondered why global schools seem miles ahead and what should India do to reduce this gap, this is the episode for you which will give you absolute clarity. On a recent trip to Oman, I went there to check on my school uniform company, and I ended up visiting a few international schools which absolutely blew my mind. The people, the culture, the systems, it felt like stepping into the future, the way they were preparing their students. Then I thought that I should invite these educationists to India because India needs to hear these voices. Therefore, on Schoolcast with Avyakt, India's first school education podcast, I invited 2 exemplary educationists from Oman who have global education experience. First, we have Dr. Terry Storer, a global education veteran with over 35 years of experience in education across 5 continents, from Venezuela to Vietnam to now Oman, serving as the director of Sahwa Schools. And with him, we have Mr. Marlon Mckenzie, a mathematics educator and deputy principal at Sahwa Schools in Oman. He has credentials from Harvard and has a decade-long experience of leadership. Today, we dive into global education truths, what is happening in global education which is not happening in India, and many more real things. Trust me, this episode will open your mind and inspire action. Let's begin. So welcome Mr. Marlon Mckenzie and Dr. Terry Storer to Schoolcast with Avyakt.
Thank you for having
Thanks,
us.
Avyakt.
How are you guys?
Good, thank you. Thank you for joining us.
Can you please give a brief introduction, although I've introduced you guys already, if you can give a brief introduction about you guys, your journey.
Okay. Okay, no problem. So I'm Marlon. I'm from Jamaica, originally a math teacher. I started out as a math teacher. I'm a math and science trained teacher. Went on to do my degrees and masters in math education. And then I found a little niche. I found myself into middle school leadership when I was back in Jamaica. And then I wanted more, so I immigrated to Oman. And since there, I've been there now 9 years. And from there, I math teacher in the classroom to middle leadership again. And then I became head of secondary section, boys section. So
Lovely.
yes.
Very nice to have you here. Sir, if you can give a brief introduction.
Sure, thanks. My name is Terry Storer. I've been in schools internationally now for 35 years. Started my career in the UK, you can probably tell from the accent. Then went overseas to teach in a school in Venezuela for a few years, moved to Tanzania, then to Oman for the first time, where I spent 15 years initially. Ended up as the secondary school principal. From there, ran a school in Vietnam, moved to New Zealand for a school, and then moved back to Oman, and I'm now director at Sahwa Schools in Muscat, Oman.
Oh, wow. And now you are here in India for a podcast.
For a podcast
Lovely,
with you.
lovely,
Thank you.
lovely to have you guys. I think this cross-cultural educational dialogues are extremely important in our world today, but it's not happening that often.
Yeah.
So what do you have to say about the significance of these cross-cultural education dialogues?
Within the context of the classroom, and I mean, in our school, we have an international curriculum, we have international teachers. And so one of the good things about having international teachers within that context, you find many times that either by chance, which, you know, a child will just be asking, what is it? What do you celebrate in your culture?
Yeah.
And then we have those now deliberate points where, as an international school, we still need to be mindful of the local culture that we also are that's hosting us.
Absolutely.
And so we need to also respect that.
Yeah.
So we have the dialogue there when we are, for example, we are celebrating the local and national days and celebrations that they have around. So, you know, those are opportunities for us to have conversations as well.
Sir, what do you think? Because students have student exchanges. They travel across the world, India to Germany, Germany to India across. But do the education leaders get any experience of traveling abroad and seeing schools and actually getting a feel of the real world?
It's a good question. There's sort of two levels to that. One is in our school, which is an international school, although we're in Muscat, we have 31 nationalities in the teaching staff. And that's by design. We choose the best teachers, but we also choose a very international staff. And so there is a lot of cross-cultural fertilization there. I think the other part of that is it's a globalizing world. And so whether you physically go to another country or not now, the landscape has changed from 20, 30, 40 years ago. And there's a lot of internationalism that happens within the host country now.
Yeah.
So I think there's probably two elements to that.
Yeah. So I think what I wanted to convey is that the leaders of the schools, be it an international or a local school, they should travel across, and that gives a lot of perspective into how to deal with children and what new things are happening in the other part of the world. But good to know your point of view.
Yeah.
So to begin with, because you guys are in Oman right now, can you give a brief about the Oman's educational landscape, whatever the pedagogy, the curriculum, how things are happening on the ground?
Yeah, I think Oman is like many countries. It's realizing that the education system needs to change and change rapidly.
Absolutely.
20 years ago, it was a very traditional, not dissimilar to the Indian system, very much exam focused, very much focused on traditional subjects. But that's now changing very rapidly to a more skill-based curriculum, and one that looks more at how people will be prepared for the future, moving away from knowledge and more towards how they deal with the world as it will be.
Absolutely.
Yes, and the focus now on the soft skills.
Yeah.
Because oftentimes we forget that the soft skills that you need when you go out into the workplace, the skills that you learn from, for example, student leadership in the school, from extracurricular activities, you're finding more of that now being a center space inside the classroom as well.
Now let's talk about the pedagogical approaches and the curriculum design. So what do you, since, sir, you worked in 5 continents, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah.
So you've seen the education system across the globe, be it New Zealand, Venezuela, Vietnam. So what do you think about pedagogy and curriculum design?
We follow the International Baccalaureate system, which is common for many of the schools that I've led across the world. And the IB have a number of programs, but the most common format that people follow is the PYP, the primary years program with the younger children, middle years program, and then the diploma program, pre-university. They have lots of central threads running through them to do with curriculum and skill development, but they're underpinned essentially by 2 things: what are called approaches to learning, the way you learn, how you learn, and how you develop that love of learning and that understanding of how you learn individually across time, how you change, and then the learner profile traits, which are those soft skills we're talking about: communication, researching, collaboration, risk-taking, all of those sort of things. So in that context, the IB may be ahead of some systems because those learner profile traits and those approaches to learning have been embedded and developed for the last 25, 30 years.
Yeah.
And they are part of the program. They're the way the program is delivered. So the content isn't the driving force. The way it's delivered is the driving force.
Absolutely. Yeah. So the collaboration, risk-taking, and all the points you mentioned, are you like putting these in the curriculum, in the pedagogy? How are you integrating these?
So one of the things about the IB, for example, you look at the primary system, the PYP, and it's transdisciplinary. So you find that it's not math being taught or science being taught.
Yeah.
A unit is being taught, and then that is integrated. What you will find is that teachers will then need to work together to ensure so that the teacher who has the strength of science within the primary PYP curriculum, or the teacher with the strength of math, will help to ensure that that unit covers all the areas and cover all the different disciplines. When you look at the interdisciplinary approach, which is for the MYP, we look at, okay, math may be taught as a subject, but you have what is called the IDU, so the interdisciplinary unit, where the staff, they collaborate. So for example, you could have math and science or math and music working together to ensure that they can pull on different skills and they can integrate where necessary. What that means is that teachers will need to work together as well. So teachers, the approaches that they are taking. So we look at you have those that they could be working together in the same grade. Then you look at the vertical alignment as well. So the teachers who are teaching, for example, MYP 4 and 5, which would be the e-assessment year, they would need to be working on collaborating with those teachers who are doing MYP 1 and 2 to ensure that all the skills that will be needed further up are also covered down in MYP 1 and 2. So lots of collaboration will take place across the curriculum as well.
That's good to know, since we are geeking out so much on IB. So can one of you please explain to our audience what is IB actually?
Terry?
So IB is the shortened version of the International Baccalaureate Program. Started in 1967, I believe, with grade 11 and 12 program. That's a pre-university program. And then the PYP, the primary years program, was added in the 80s, and then the middle years program to link the two together.
So primary years is from what grade to what grade?
From kindergarten to grade 5.
Okay.
Middle years is from grade 6 to grade 10, and then the diploma is in the final years, 2 years, grade 11 and 12.
Okay.
And it's a way of approaching. It came out of the desire to create a curriculum where people were thinking about their place in the world, be it world peace or how they support communities or service or climate change or any of those big issues that we're talking about now. So it was the idea of taking away the emphasis from individual subjects to how the subjects work within the world. And so sort of following on from what Marlon was saying earlier, to give you an example, I'm sure when you were at school, you were taught percentages at some point.
Yeah.
And they were probably taught in a maths class, and you were told how to do it, but possibly not told why. You're told how to do it, but not why.
Absolutely.
And then maybe 2 or 3 months later, you'd be in your science lesson, and your science teacher would say, now we need to do a percentage of this. And you'd probably forgotten.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because there was no context to the way it was taught. It doesn't mean your teacher taught it badly. But the idea of the IB is that the interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary nature of it is that there's a context for what you're taught and why you're learning things and how they can then be applied. And so that's sort of the idea.
So in a way, it's for holistic development of a child.
Correct.
Correct. So how do international schools in Oman like Al Sahwa integrate the global curricula as well, which is the IB, and like drop it down to the local perspectives? So how do you manage both these perspectives of Oman and the IB?
I'll talk all the time unless you swim.
Okay. So most international and the IB is a framework, of course, and so within it also ensures, and one of the key things it will speak of is that you need to respect the culture that is hosting you. So for example, we are being hosted by Oman. So when I say we're being hosted, or if it's India or whatever, so when they will come in to assess your school or to give you accreditation, they will look to see, yes, you are international and you are ensuring that you're exposing your students to international mindedness and global initiatives, but how are you ensuring that you maintain the image of your culture, that your cultural context that you are in? So you need to ensure that this cultural context is also evident and available. So when you take your students in, you are not sometimes we say water down. You're not watering down anything. It's a framework that you're taking and you're putting in. So you do have some places, for example, they are operating the MYP. They are doing the IB programs. But you'll find that they integrate they're using books that are Cambridge books, for example, or so on. So the IB is not telling you that you can't do that.
Oh, really?
Yes, it's not telling you that you can't do that. But the tenets of the IB must be there. The international mindedness, the frameworks that we're using, the approaches to learning that we're using, the learner profiles, the development of the learner profiles and these areas. Those are the areas that we are focusing on.
Okay.
So it's important as administrators of schools to ensure that while you take those and you take it to the cultural context and within Oman or within India or within whatever other country, how can you embed this and how can you allow the students that you have to interpret these profiles to fit them? And then that becomes, so for example, today when we were visiting one of those schools, we were looking around and you could see where the students were saying, I can do this or I can do that. Based on that, for example, you say, I'm a critical thinker. What does a critical thinker for an Omani child? That is what is important. Or if they were coming to, for example, an Indian school, what does a critical learner, critical thinker look for an Indian child? And so when they are looking around, how do you define those contexts within the culture that you are in? So that's what is also important.
So is IB a board, like it gives you guidelines that you have to follow all these, or what is IB?
I don't understand the question, sorry.
So CBSE in India, we have a Central Board of Secondary Education. It's a board which governs about 30,000 schools. So they give their guidelines and they have their procedures which schools have to follow to be affiliated with CBSE. So is IB a similar version of that?
Yeah. So the International Baccalaureate is based in Geneva, Switzerland, and it is an organisation, and they have common sets of guidelines, rules that all schools around the world follow.
Okay.
But they're interpreted through local lenses. Okay. So to give you an example, all students in an international baccalaureate program, because it's an international program, have to study at least 2 languages, sometimes 3. Most countries it will be English because that's the lingua franca around the world, and another language, and it's probably your local language. So in Spain it's probably Spanish. Here it would probably be Hindi or Malayalam or whatever it is. And then there's a possibility of studying another language. So there's sort of that framework that allows a commonality but an individualization as well. It's interesting. You were just talking about internationalism versus nationalism in a context.
Absolutely.
One of the conversations I sometimes have with staff, I say we've got 31 nationalities on staff, and we do that by design. So you have people from India or Kenya or Colombia or the UK or America, obviously all around the world, and they come with a set of paradigms about their national system.
Absolutely.
What education looks like, what behavior looks like, what learning looks like,
they have
what
their
assessment looks like.
notions,
Absolutely. And so, but they're coming into this melting pot of ideas and expectations overlaid by an international curriculum. And so it's one of the conversations I sometimes have with new staff is that they're not here to change the way Omanis think in our context of an Omani school. I'm not there to be arrogant enough to say to Omanis, you need to learn like an Englishman or like a Jamaican. You need to learn like an Omani. But we're also in the country because we obviously bring something. And so how do we take the essence of what it is to be an Omani citizen, to be an Omani national, to be proud of your country, and add value to it from my system, and add value to it from a Jamaican system or from an Indian system. And what can we learn? It's a two-way process. How do we take on board what's important for you and what is possibly lacking in my own culture? But how can we share with you what might be an alternative for you as well?
So basically understanding the local nuance and getting the IB, the guidelines, the board, everything, and matching them together.
And trying to improve on both systems without devaluing the host country.
Brilliant. Since you guys have so many years of experience in education, many countries, and you also in mathematics in Jamaica and Oman, so what is one thing you would suggest to any educationist that they should do which will improve their school?
Relationships
with? Can you elaborate?
So I used to run a school in New Zealand that followed a different curriculum, not an IB curriculum. And one of the things we started the school year with all teachers is, and I'm sure you and your team have got rupees in your pocket.
And
how many times do you hold a rupee note each day? Thousands? Hundreds?
Yeah,
I don't
like
know.
many times, yeah.
If I asked you now to draw a 10 rupee note,
Yeah.
could you do it?
I won't be able to do that for sure.
And the same sometimes happens in schools. Every day we go in, we see things every day,
Yeah.
but we no longer look.
Yeah.
We no longer recognize, we no longer notice. It becomes background.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes with some educators, we stop building consciously, getting to know people as individuals, getting to know people who they are, their strengths. We had a conversation earlier today with Mukesh, and just that wonderful line he said where, when I did something wrong, teachers told me what I was doing wrong, didn't look for what I could do.
Absolutely.
You know, and so I think that growth mindset, that what can I do, not what can I not do. And many education systems, particularly education systems that are set up with terminal exams, are set up to find out what you can't do, not what you can do.
Absolutely on point. Yeah.
And I think that would be the thing I would change. What can I do? Don't tell me what I can't do. Help me get better at what I can do.
Beautiful. Beautiful to know that. Sir, do you have anything to say about this?
Yeah, relationships. I was coming with relationships. No, I'll have to dig for something else. So to ensure that the children are happy. Yeah. For me, I would say to schools or any other educator, ensure that the students who are coming to your school, it's a place they want to be. Children are escaping, they are leaving homes, there are so many things happening at home sometimes. So school is the safe space for them. So we need to ensure that it's a place that they feel happy and they are comfortable.
Great. Lovely answers. There is a lot to learn from people who have taught so many students across the world, because schooling is the foundation of anything. You become a cricketer, you become an entrepreneur, you become anything. Schooling is the foundation. So amazing job. Now let's talk about mental health. So in India right now, what is happening is that schools have a counselor. It is mandated by the board and ministry that every school must have one counselor or somebody where schools can go and they can talk to them about anything. So what is happening about mental health in Oman?
Okay, so thanks for that question, Avyakt. As a pastoral leader for the boys' school specifically, that falls that the well-being. I probably just prefer to say well-being, because sometimes we say mental health and it becomes very limiting. So when we talk about well-being, you talk about, exercise, you talk about mental health, you talk about physical health, you talk about so many things. And it's something that, especially since COVID, has become center point of what teachers are now called on to do. So a few years ago, for example, I would be meeting with a parent, and a parent would not be concerned that the teacher makes their child feels uncomfortable, for example. But now the teacher, I've met with parents who are telling, the important thing for me is my child likes the teacher, and my child likes the subject. My child will do well afterwards. So you're finding that the conversation is now more about, how does my child feel in the classroom? Does my child feel safe? The other things you're finding, even parents, again, post-COVID, are more concerned about that psychosocial aspect of their children. Yes, okay, this homework is stressing my child. My child doesn't need to do the work. They're not so concerned, because they are saying, if my child is well and their well-being is taken care of, then they will learn eventually. So that's one of the things now, as educators, we are looking, when we talk to our pastoral care teachers, we call them homeroom tutors. That's one of the things we say to them. When you go in the morning, be observant. Look at is the student not talking today? Those little things. And so we do have, and our culture and the context is a little bit different. We do have a male and female counselor available. Okay. My office is there in the middle of boys' school with all windows glass on 4 sides. So where they know, and I say to boys as well, when it's not a space. And I also encourage staff, don't send students to me because they are naughty. Also let me also celebrate them. We know we have put up around the school some spaces where we are celebrating children, because we also want to know that not just academics. I also have some things that we have now instituted where we are, for example, a child will come to me and say, if I do one or two things, can you send a nice email home? It's not academic there, but it's also taking care that this child is struggling with so many other things.
Absolutely.
And so you find that one thing that the child is doing well. And then, so that is within the framework. And then we start looking at the personal and social education that we also do. So we have a timetable session every week where we focus on the personal and social education, where we look at life skills, we look at interaction and stuff like that.
Amazing. Yeah. So I think that's what is an answer to a question which the whole world is talking about right now. Will AI replace teachers? I think AI can do the easier part, easier things, but can it help the child when they have a mental health problem? So probably they cannot.
Yeah. It's an interesting question, isn't it? Because the AI provides a lot of opportunities that we're just starting to touch, because AI is developing along with us. I think one of the powers of AI will be to individualize learning. I'm sure you and we still, to an extent, we try to differentiate lessons, but you have such a spectrum of kids, it's hard to differentiate effectively to a whole class sometimes. And so I think AI will allow for far more personalization of learning, which will support mental health, which will support progress, which will support academic attainment, all of those things. But one of the things that strongly came out of COVID was online learning is not a substitute for human interaction. We are creatures that need to speak, talk, be together, 100%. Laugh together. And the online environment is doesn't support that. And all the mental health, you were talking about mental health, all the mental health issues that are coming up, many of them are rooted back in social media and the interactions that people are having online. And so that virtual world is an important world and a world that will increase, but I hope it never substitutes for the physical world that we're part of.
Definitely. And I think Australia recently came out with a very new law, which is children below 16 are not allowed to use social media at all.
It's interesting. If you do a little bit of reading around the world, you'll find lots of schools in the world have banned cell phones in schools on a national level. Which obviously is different, but linked. France, China, there's lots of schools countries that no longer allow kids to have cell phones in schools as part of that drive to move you away from that virtual world and force you into the real world. So I think it's a really important point.
Definitely. In India, students aren't allowed to carry their phones. Are they allowed to carry them in Oman?
The government has just changed the law, actually. So so no, technically no. But that implementation takes a while.
Okay, so earlier it was allowed and now it's not allowed.
Correct.
Okay. So it will take It will take some time, I think.
Yeah, there's a period of adjustment. And there's some valid reasons that parents have. I want my child to be safe. I want them to be able to contact me after school. There are some reasons to have phones. But having it in school and using it in school are two different things.
Absolutely. Yeah. Great. So since we spoke about AI, so do you think is our current education system preparing students for future job markets, be it IB or be it any curriculum? Let's talk about IB for now. Do you think it is?
I'll start. I think it's a really interesting question. The majority of students, certainly in our schools, that go through our system, go on to university or college. Very few go straight into the job market. And so we're as schools, we're in a sort of a middle ground at the moment, because we're trying to do the right thing, all the things we've spoken about, mental well-being, skill development, all of those things. So we're trying to do all of those things, but ultimately one of our roles is to prepare students for university entrance. And if university entrance is based on grades, which in most university systems it still is, there's sometimes an essay, there's sometimes an interview, but mostly it's grades, or certainly that's the first level of filter. Until the universities change their admissions criteria, we're beholden to prepare the students for that. And then you take a step back. What are the examination systems doing to get those grades for the universities? Most of them are exam driven. So are we preparing students for university? Yes. Are we preparing for the future world more than we were 10 years ago? As much as we should be? I'd say not.
Yeah, because I think the world is changing rapidly. Every other day, you have something huge happening in AI, which wasn't happening earlier. So maybe we need to think about something.
Yeah, but I think that's driven by the universities, by the examination boards, because ultimately, we do a good job, a really good job within the limits we have, but the limits are still there, and those limits need to move more rapidly than they are doing.
But with that though, and I agree 100% with Terry as well. But we also look at what is it that we are introducing as subjects. So, for example, in our school, we have design, which, of course, with AI coming in and that will help. So it means that the machines that we will have but it is still within the context of. But what it just means that will be greater. We'll have greater support for the students. We are looking at now the IB has also looked at how much AI can students use in their research. So they are now looking at, okay, they may be able to use AI as a source of, but within the context of, so with AI, and AI is evolving. I mean, 4 years ago, we didn't have what we have now. But the speed at which AI is also learning and turning over, it means that maybe in another 10 years, what we will have, and children don't grow overnight. So it's difficult, but within the context of what we have, as Terry would have said,
One of the things that we've done in the last 2 years is we've really tried to get teachers on board with AI, because, you've got teachers my age who are less of an adopter, teachers who are 25 who are more adopters. And one of the things that we've developed, which I think has been a really powerful tool, rather than trying to teach them, here's a program you can use, here's a platform you can use, because they're changing so rapidly. And they're so diverse. We've developed essentially a rubric, a 5-point rubric, where level 0 is there's no AI involved at all, and level 5 is it's totally AI generated, and then there's a gradation in between. And so we'll now say to the students, for this assignment, you can go up to level 2. Which might be minimum use of AI, or a teacher will give an assignment and they'll say this is a level 2 assignment. And so we're trying to use the teachers as educators of how students can use AI meaningfully, rather than just put in a prompt, take it out, cut and paste it. So we're trying to drive a process where AI is being used thoughtfully and meaningfully.
Absolutely.
And with that as well, at the beginning of the year, Dr. Terry also appointed 2 members of staff who lead professional development as it relates to AI integration. So we have these are our key people who are running different professional development workshops as well within the school to ensure that our staff are updated where necessary.
Great. Sounds good. So in India, what is happening is the ministry, we came up with a new education policy back in 2020. And then we had a curriculum framework of 2023. So things are evolving because it's a country with a huge population. So things take time. But their primary focus is vocational subjects. So we have about 43 vocational subjects in grade 11, if I'm not wrong, and 21 in grade 9. So they are focusing on robotics, data science, AI, homeschooling, and design, manufacturing of shoes, multiple textile designing. There are multiple things which they have come out with, and they are rigorously focusing on that.
That would be
So Oman's doing something similar. It's recognizing that not everybody is going to go to university, and university degrees are not necessarily the skill set that the future will need as well. And that's linked back to what I was talking about earlier at Oman Vision 2040. So a similar sort of thrust. There are different vocational programs now that are available, different pathways that are available, a big focus on technology, just as it is in India, as it has to be everywhere. A big focus on industries that are specific to Oman. So tourism is one example, which will diversify the country's economy. So very much within the context of Oman, but it's a very similar process.
So tourism is a subject they're introducing in schools?
Very much so, yeah.
Oh, lovely. Can you guys share one example of how you guys took some cultural nuance of Oman and then you applied it in IB, and then you changed some rule, or you had some new policy in school, or some instance happened where you had to change something which was already happening?
Yes, but one of the things to bear in mind, Avyakt, is that though we exist in the Oman context, especially within our school, as Terry said earlier, we have 31 different nationalities. So perhaps when you talk about educators, we have as Omani staff, 48 Omani staff, some of whom are teachers as well. And so you find that when you look at it from that perspective, it's more of an international blend right there in the staff room. Right already. So you don't have an Oman context as per se when you talk about pedagogy and you talk about that sort of stuff. One of the things we started looking at 2 years, this is our second year, we look at how do we get teachers to take ownership of their classroom. So because of that, we implemented a new appraisal model system, professional growth cycle. And what that did is that it had teachers stepping back and saying, I'm not being stressed anymore. I'm going to be looking at what goal I can find for my students that works within my classroom. Because, as Terry outlined before, I'm coming from Jamaica. I have my own way of learning.
Absolutely.
I have my own way of teaching because I'm coming from a system. But now, and I would come with all this research that I'm reading from different places. But now I have students who are Omani students who are in this context, who are in front of me. I may not necessarily be able to apply the very same things. So I have this literature in the back of my head. And so through the professional growth cycle model that we have used, we have said to the teacher, you have these students in front of you. We want you to just spend the year working with your children, identify a goal at the beginning of the year, and work through the year within the context of Sahwa Schools, not within the context of any other school, but within the context of Sahwa School. And based on the research that you are working on, does it work for you? But at the end of the day, our goal is the interaction with the student. Has there been any improvement in student interaction with you? So it could be that you look at, I'm teaching the child how to write, or writing skills, or math skills, or socio-emotional skills. It could be anything. But the important thing is that we work this through. Then at the end of the year, we have what is an inset day, where this is now a true reflection. So it's teachers who have researched in our school, who have worked within the context of Omani children, even if they are first year teachers in the school, what they are presenting now in May. And we just concluded last week, Sunday, or inset day, where we had presentation by staff. So the presentation that is being done there, I'm not talking about Jamaican children. I'm talking about Omani children who I've taught for the past year. And these are the findings that I have. These are the things I found. So that's one of the things we have done to change when we say we look at, global, how is it global, and how can we focus on what we have as Omani? So we have the Omani students in front of us. Does this work for Omani children? So at the moment, we have 58 goals that work this year. So we have basically 58 projects that were done where teachers are saying, this is what works with Omani children, or didn't work with Omani children. So that's something that's new that we're working with as well.
So some people argue that standardized testing impacts creativity. So what's your point of view on that? Should we have standardized testing? Should we have regular exams? Should we have something else? What do you think about that?
It sort of goes back to what I was talking about earlier. How are kids getting into university? And there needs to be a system where there is a level of comparison, where subjectivity is lost to an extent. And standardized testing is probably the easiest way of doing that. And it's the traditional way of doing it, and everybody understands it, and everybody hangs their hat on it. I mean, you could make an argument that standardized testing is remotely unfair. I'm sure you've seen the cartoon with the fish and the monkey walking across. And they said, right, today's test is to climb the tree. it obviously doesn't work for all students. I was not very good at exams. I was good in school, but I just wasn't very good at exams, and so that impacted me. So the question is, how do you assess students fairly? And India is a really good example with 1.3 billion people. Is it
1.5?
1.5 billion people. Now, how do you assess that number of people and say that a student over there can be compared against a student over here? And to that extent, standardized testing provides a metric. Whether it's fair or not is a different conversation. In regards to creativity, if you're teaching towards a standardized test, I mean, creativity by its nature is devising something that's new, surprising, original, but importantly is fit for purpose. So if you're devising something that's new, original, different, unique, whatever you want to call it, that by its nature can't be a standardized test, because a standardized test produces one outcome. So does standardized testing impact creativity? Absolutely.
No, but I agree with what you are saying, that they have to achieve some marks and they have to go to universities. But don't you think what we were discussing in the morning with Mukesh sir, that there should be more learning outcomes? That even if they fail at exams, what are they good at? They should have maybe a vocal presentation starting from grade 1 itself. They should have presentations.
So, and again, I'll talk about the IB system, but there's many national systems that do this. The British system, the New Zealand system. I'm not sure about other systems. The American system to an extent. So talking about the international baccalaureate system, there is a terminal exam in most subjects. So that a proportion of the marks between 50 and 75% roughly in most subjects is the terminal exam. But somewhere between 50 and 25% of the marks comes from ongoing coursework. So in sciences, it might be lab reports. In languages, it might be orals, presentations, or speeches. It might be building something in a design subject. And so that final exam mark, that standardized exam mark, is mitigated to an extent by the ongoing coursework and project work. So it's sort of a model that's trying to get to where you're saying, but also
takes some time.
But also maintaining that standardized part so that those results have some currency and transferability.
Yeah. And while you still will have, I mean, most standardized tests would be done at the exit point. So if the exit point is grade 12, you have, and one of the things, I had an experience a few years back in Jamaica where we have this comparison where we say people who are good with languages are not good at math. And I remember having a child who came to me and very nervous, different from a different school. And she said to me, Mr. Mckenzie, how can I approach? I'm very good. I can explain myself, but I just don't know how to put this X and Y on the paper. So I said to her, write a paragraph. And she said, you mean I can write a paragraph and it will be marked? I said, who said it couldn't be marked? So I think when we talk about creativity as well, it's sometimes we forget to encourage our students to be able to express themselves on whatever medium that is given. Maybe we don't give enough, which may be where you're saying as it relates to creativity. But if you have developed that child's confidence over time, for them to understand, okay, I'm good at English, but I am able to express myself this way, then that fear that they have towards standardized testing becomes different, because then they understand, oh, but I know it. I think one of the problems we have when it comes to standard, for example, math, as a math major myself and a math teacher, it's difficult because students fear the subject and already. So if you get them to overcome that fear from very early on, you could find that perhaps, yes, then they'll still, because at the end of the day, we need something that's across the board that we can use to say we're looking at university admissions and stuff. So we still need to have something there where we look at. But lots of, even back in Jamaica, we have the school-based assessments where it's at 20% of the overall grade. So the child would know from early that, okay, I can work on this aspect of it here.
There is some change though. I remember, it must have been 20 years ago now, MIT in Boston, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, introduced a program where, obviously in America, it's often through the SAT test or the high school transcript or the AP exams. But MIT introduced a program a long time ago now where you could gain admission through. Have you heard of maker spaces?
I haven't.
Okay, so a maker space is basically a place where you go and solve problems, but in a physical sense usually. So you actually make something that solves a problem. So sort of like a design lesson, but often student-led. And very, very big movement around the world. And if you create a portfolio of maker spaces submissions, so like an art portfolio, here's my problem, here's how I got through it, the design cycle essentially. MIT will use that as a potential route for exam entry. So there is some movement, but it's
Things
slow.
are happening,
But it's slow.
but
But it's slow.
Like in India, what is happening is the parents, they are after the school if the child gets less marks. So the parents' obsession is kind of hurting the child. Like they are getting involved too much and they think the school is not doing anything. Whereas they don't understand that the education is not only about marks, it's holistic. And it is a big problem in India. So is the same problem happening in Oman, that parents' obsession is hurting the child, the school, the education?
I think it's the world over. I don't think it's just Oman. Having taught in Vietnam, Southeast Asia, Korea, those countries have very strong echoes of what you were saying here in India. So I think it's the world over. I think in Oman, the population is slowly becoming more educated. And it's a small country, so it's easier to educate. The critical mass gets there much quicker. And we now have a lot of parents who understand, and again, I'm going to go back to the IB, who understand the IB because we have families that stay with us for many years. They understand the value of it. They understand what's going on behind the scenes. And we often get people come in and say, my child was at a party and the other parents were saying, oh, that's so good, because they can speak to adults and they can have a conversation and they have an opinion and they all of those soft skills. So I think they're becoming more apparent and more understood and more valued amongst many. But you're still going to have that hardcore of people who want the exam grades, want the scholarship, want still see that as the end result. But certainly there's a shift demographically within Oman to people who understand what education needs to do for the future.
So like India, majority of the parents are like after the teachers and the school's life. It's not happening in Oman. Majority of them are not doing that.
No. There's a lot of trust between the parent community and the school. You get the choice in Oman. I'm not sure in India, but you get the choice in Oman of which school you go to. So people make an educated choice. And then have a loyalty to that choice. And there is a lot of trust placed in teachers. And rightly so. It's a great profession.
So what is one thing you guys think that should change about global education in general? What is one thing you should change and that is not able to change? It's a difficult thing. It's ingrained in our systems. What do you think?
Can you go first? I'm going to say the same thing that I've said before. That we value what kids can do, not what kids can learn. It comes from the universities, from the examination boards. And while universities still require grades, while examination boards provide the vehicle to get those grades, what can happen in a school is important and has changed massively over the last 20 years. But it can't change as fundamentally as it needs to. And I think that's the thing I would change.
Now CBSE, the Indian board, has come out with a parents' curriculum sort of a thing. So it's a parents' calendar where they've integrated the involvement of parents in the child's real study and their sports and their life in school. So is IB or Oman doing any such thing where parents are actively involved in a student's life?
Not in a prescribed way. All schools invite parents in. We have lots of parents' events. We have parents' associations. So we have lots of parental involvement. Parents go on trips. Parents come in and read. Parents are part of Grandparents' Day. Parents are part of our National Day celebration. Parents are part of our bazaars, our sports days. So parents are heavily involved. but it's not in a prescribed way. It's on an individual basis.
Not yet prescribed by the board.
No.
Yeah, and it would be difficult to, well, within the framework as well. It depends. I mean, how we, when you prescribe it and you say you must be here on this day, this time, parents can be busy, but we do have an open door policy where parents also are able to come in and they can contact us and we can have the dialogue with them. That's ongoing. I think that's something that we also value at Sahwa, where our parents know that they can come in. They can, if they send an email, there's somebody, or a phone call, somebody will be there to support them as it relates to their child.
Great. What is one thing you guys think which you are doing in your school which nobody is doing, like other schools are not doing? Maybe it's a very small thing as well. What is that?
I don't know whether I can say nobody else is doing it, but a couple of things that I think we do very well. I think one, we are, within the context of the country we're in, I think we do an excellent job of delivering an international education, a high quality international education through an Omani framework. Our students leave us intensely proud of who they are as Omanis, of the country they come from, of the culture they come from. They're very, very strongly Omani still, but with a worldview. So I think that's a real strength.
Yes,
that would be one thing. I think the other thing that we do very well, or we're getting better at, and we're certainly a long way down the journey, is what Marlon was talking earlier about, which is the professional growth of teachers, where I'm sure even in your industry, people go for professional growth, and we talk about individualizing learning and differentiating learning and differentiating assessment, and every child being individual. And then we send teachers off to courses where they all sit in a room together. They're not active, and they all learn the same thing for the same number of hours, and then mysteriously are expected to apply it. So the program that we've implemented, where teachers drive their own professional growth, teachers identify what they need to get better at in the context of helping those students in front of them. I think it is powerful.
Yes.
All right. That's a great answer. Looks like you guys are running the school in a very good way, because your school is thriving. You have 1,200 students, IB curriculum, one of the best schools of Oman. So it's very nice to know.
Yeah,
that's great.
And we're proud of it.
So if I'm a student in any school and I come up to you guys, or I go to my principal or director or whoever, and I tell them that I have no interest in studies, I have no interest in studying, and I like sports. So how do you think schools should tackle this statement? Be it any school, any board, IB, CBSE, anything.
I keep looking at you, so I'm not talking all the time.
I mean, to be fair, I remember when I came to Sahwa School, and I'll give you context. I had a young man in my homeroom, and he said to me, when I spoke with him, he said, I don't want to learn any of this. I want to be a YouTuber.
Okay.
That boy went on to become vice president of our student council. He launched our first student magazine.
Amazing.
So oftentimes when you say, oh, I am not interested in this, as the educator and probably the person with the experience in the room, it's important for me to have the conversation with you and guide you to find out more about what is it that you like, and then guide you accordingly. It's not about, I am not interested in school. It's what aspect of school am I interested in? So what I could find out from that young man was that it's not that he's not interested in school. The aspects that people are focusing on, he was not quite interested in that. And that boy led so many initiatives in the school. When we had any function, he was the one who would go into the auditorium and go into the music box. Because from very early, I learned that was his area. So when he's doing that, he then didn't mind doing the math and English. Oftentimes when students say they don't want to, it's because we're forcing the math and the English and forgetting that this child here area of strength is here. And what it took from me as a homeroom teacher, it took a little bit more work. But what I was able to do was to reach out to the teachers to say, can you support if there's any video editing that you need to do? Here's a student who... And so because he became popular with teachers, so he started doing work, and he left grade 12, very good grades. But it comes back to the teacher in the room saying, okay, what is it you'd like? How can I guide you? How can I support you? How can I get my colleagues to support you with what you want to do?
Wonderful. That's a brilliant example, and that's what I was looking for. So that child became a YouTuber?
No. he's actually in uni now. I think he's doing business or something.
Great.
Because again, it's a phase. Sometimes it's a phase.
Yeah.
But
You keep on
because
evolving.
he got the opportunity to do some of the things he thought YouTubers would be doing.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
afterwards, I mean, in grade 7, we went out, my homeroom class. He planned with the class. They had a field trip there. He went out. He was the videographer for the day. He edited. He did all the interviews. He did, because he was now excited. He had his little microphone and everything. And I would say to him, okay, if you want me to store it under my table in the staff room just to keep it safe. So it's also that he felt supported. So he didn't. Children, and I may be wrong with this, but I believe sometimes when as adults we start saying to the child, you cannot, they will start pushing more. So you start saying, no, but you need to do math.
Yeah.
If you say to the child, yes, but what happens if you have a sport injury? What's the backup plan?
Yeah.
How do you, what else? What else is there? Okay, so if you're doing this and you need to run a business, what skills do you need to run a business? Okay, sometimes they'll tell you, but Mr., I will make enough money. And said, yeah, but you have a sport injury. You can't make any more money from that sport injury because of that sport injury. What skills will you need? And a child is never too young, especially, well, I'm a high school teacher. So I'm saying, a child is never too young to have this conversation, though that boy was in grade 7. But these conversations, they become the start. The children are very reflective oftentimes. And once you start having the conversation and finding the support system, because we are there as a system of support for our children, for our students. So once we know that children like this, they want support with this, and you start supporting them, you find that they tend to do the other things, but they know that they have a safe space to do what they actually like. Well.
Wonderful. I love talking to you guys because I think I can learn so much from the conversations we can have. But for today, this is it, and we'll keep the rest of the conversation for part 2 whenever you guys are in India next time.
Or when you're
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here. Is there anything you would like to say at the end to the students, the parents, the school principals, directors? Is there any one thing you would like to say? Parting words.
I think for me, just remember that we're all human and we're all trying to do the right thing, and we all want the best for everybody.
Yes. Make every child life matter. Make them happy.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.